welcome you all to this panel, Listen to Local Actors, to bring up some topics that are especially plaguing West Africa, topics of peace and security, human development, how we can better work together at the local, state, and international level on these topics of development and supporting and strengthening communities to prevent susceptibility to engagement in violence. So we have some wonderful panelists here today. I'll go ahead and introduce you all, and then we'll get started with our statements. We have Theodora Williams-Ante from FOSDA, the Foundation for Security and Development in Africa. Theodora has 10 years of experience in development work. She works really closely with youth and strategic planning. Monitoring evaluation is also in her toolkit wheelhouse. She brings immense experience in the areas of peace and security, gender equality, youth development, human rights, and governance. She holds a Master of Arts in Political Science and Management from the University of Ghana. Welcome, Theodora. We have Paul Mensa. Apologies, I'm not so good with the names, but Paul joins us as a political scientist with a focus on security sector governance, as well as local and urban governments. Paul's at CDD, the Center for Democratic Development in Ghana, but CDD also works across the region and as well as in East Africa. Highly experienced in security analysis, and especially on elections-related conflicts, cross-border crimes, political vigilantism, and communal violence. Is consulted for the African Union, the United Nations Development Program, UNDP, as well as consulted for National Peace Council of Ghana, Ghana Journalists Association, and many other civil society organizations in Ghana. So thank you, Paul. Welcome. Mutaru. Mutaru joins us as a founder and executive director of the West African Center for Counter-Extremism, WACCE. Mutaru Mumuni Mukhtar is a scholar at Aspen Institute Aspen Security Forum, previously a Mandela Washington Fellow with the U.S. Department of State. And he's won the 40 Under 40 Award for Security Personality of the Year in 2018. He has extraordinary contributions to security in Ghana, focused on the underpinnings of radicalization to violent extremism, and conducts training programs for this. Emmanuel, hello, welcome. Emmanuel Amantepe is joining us from Youth Advocates Ghana. YAG is the convener of the African Youth SDG Summit. It's also a youth development consultant with focus on governance, participation, and youth empowerment. Emmanuel worked as country coordinator for Voice Africa's Future, which is now the Citizens Report, Pan-African Initiative, holds a BA in Development Studies from Presbyterian University and Executive Certificate in Development Policy and Practice from Nelson Mandela School of Public Governance. Welcome, Emmanuel. And last but not least, of course, we hope to have Solomon Kuziampofo as join us from Friends of the Nation. He might be having some technical difficulties, but if he joins us, we look forward to that as well. But I'd like to set the stage. We'll have Mutaru start if you'd care to kind of set the stage of the security situation in West Africa, and then we'll let everyone kind of share their insights and what they have to share.
Thank you, Tammy. Good afternoon to everyone, and welcome to today's program. First of all, thank you for inviting me. I'm very excited to be part of this, especially when it focuses on violent extremism or security in West Africa. I think I want to begin by looking at the security situation. I mean, building a profile of the threat of violent extremism within the sub-region. If you look at the issue of violent extremism today, we have significantly failed in the Sahel in terms of dealing with the threat. And it is largely a product of the approach and several other factors. If you look at a period of, say, 2014, 2015, this was the peak of violent extremism in West Africa. And of course, globally, this was a period of the highest, that's a period we recorded the highest level of fatalities in terms of violent extremism. And even though the numbers have come down today, we have continued to see expansion into areas where hitherto we did not have violent extremism. 4 or 5 years ago, we're dealing with about 4 countries, only 4 countries in West Africa and in the Sahel in dealing with the threat, but it has significantly expanded. And today we are talking about 53% of the entire West African space, ECOWAS countries dealing with violent extremism. Even though the numbers have come down from that peak we're talking about, we are seeing it happen in very, very complex ways. We are seeing the threat changing in terms of the drivers. The ideological underpinnings have significantly featured differently. And we're seeing the threat happen in ways that relate to competition over resources between pastoralists and local farming populations. The clashes from this is one of the biggest sources of fatalities around violent extremism. We also see in the feature of ethnic tensions, conflicts along ethnic lines, along chieftaincy, and other local drivers of conflicts. These are the faces you see in terms of the evolving nature of the threat of violent extremism. And what have we done so far? Say, if you're looking at from 2011 up till today, I want to summarize that in terms of how we have dealt with the threat. I think that at the moment, anyone who is following the threat within the sub-region would be very safe to conclude that we have significantly failed in the Sahel in dealing with the threat of violent extremism. And we have failed partly and actually largely because of the approach to dealing with the threat. We have failed because of over-militarization, over-securitization of the response to terrorism in the region. If we look at the various forces that are involved, the security architecture that has been created to deal with violent extremism is disproportionately focused on a militarized approach. We're seeing MINUSMA that has 15,000 forces here. We are having Operation Barkhane by the French forces, of course. We know that the French forces have pulled out in most parts of the region in the Sahel. We saw them having over 5,000 forces in this space. Beyond that, we have G5 Sahel forces, over 5,000 forces in there dealing with the threat. We have several other security initiatives that have been part of the mix of the forces or tools we are seeking to use to deal with the threat. And this includes the Operation Takuba, which has other forces in there, and several security initiatives. The only one that seemed to move away from this securitized, militarized, or kinetic approach is the Accra Initiative that is seeking to use non-military, non-combat approach dealing with the threat. Apart from that, this architecture has been the key and the main ways we have sought to deal with terrorism in the region. And this has produced, counterproductive outcomes. We saw huge instances of human rights violations involving these kinds of operations. And we have this properly captured in many human rights reports that seem to undermine the security measures put in place in the region. These things did not or failed to build the goodwill, the public goodwill that is required from the local population in terms of dealing with the threat collectively. And when you have that kind of situation happen, you're going to have a backlash from the local population, people whose families or friends or community members who are victimized by this militarized approach to dealing with this threat would definitely rise up in revenge against the state, in revenge against these forces that are in this space intended to deal with the problem of violent extremism. So this approach has been very, very detrimental. It has been very counterproductive in dealing with the threat. Another element or effect of having that approach is that it undermines the role or the space for civil society participation in dealing with this space. Because obviously, there are aspects of it that are properly or more suited for civil society engagement in terms of how do we put in mechanisms or measures to deal with cohesion, social cohesion within the local population. How do we ensure you engage in sensitization to get local populations to understand what this threat we're dealing with is about? It is a very, very complex threat. And so you have to be very intentional about it in terms of how you go about this threat. When you have this kind of approach, it also brings problems of competition amongst the various security actors, competition for visibility, and competition for funding. And this does not augur well. And today we're seeing reports, I think just a couple of weeks ago on the 16th of November, we had the Assistant UN Secretary General present a report on the situation in the Sahel. And in that report, it contains the serious problem of funding from MINUSMA. And this is a very, very serious thing that undermines the effort in the region. And we've seen other things that have been highlighted in that report. And it is largely because we have over-focused on the security aspects of dealing with the threat. And that has led to a focus away from the other factors that are actually key. And by this I'm referring to the drivers of radicalization and violent extremism. We are looking at the economic underpinnings, the social factors, and the existing vulnerabilities along social lines that could be handled away from combat measures. And that hasn't been taken care of. And so if we really want to have a sustainable approach, an effective, successful approach to dealing with terrorism in West Africa, we have to relook at the approach. You would see in literature, talking about a whole of society approach, a whole of government approach. Those are proper, those are, nice to hear, but we need to be able to operationalize this, thinking to ensure that it reflects within the local population. Another element that that comes with this is the issue of human rights. Look, we cannot make any sustainable gains in dealing with terrorism in the region without engaging in activities that are human rights compliant. We have to take leadership role in dealing with a complex problem that requires a lot of discipline, which means that we have to be human rights compliant in measures we put in place. Counterterrorism will fail if it is not human rights compliant. And a lot of human rights reports paint a very, very poor picture of what is happening within the Sahel. And in the report that I make reference to by the Assistant UN Secretary General, it is featured the issue of human rights violations. The last major thing I want to highlight is the role of young people, youth in this particular space. The youth is a huge demography that we have to focus on if we want to be successful with counterterrorism measures. We are told that we should not see young people as a challenge or as a problem. But anyone who is working in this space or following developments in this space knows very well that it is difficult not to see young people as a challenge. And it's for several reasons. Young people largely are perpetrators as well as victims of what is going on in the region. And it's for several reasons. There is a report, a study by the UNDP titled The Journey to Extremism. The Journey to Extremism highlighted the role of young people in this problem. And they looked at the role of government in dealing with the problem. And it says that young people inevitably are a problem if we do not create space and provide an environment that allows them to live out their aspirations, to create job opportunities and a space that allows them to live out their own aspirations. In that report, It says that governments are in the way of young people, not in support of young people and young people's initiatives. And this is very telling if we want to ensure that we are successful in dealing with terrorism in the region. Somewhere in the Sahel, we are seeing a lot of young people who have developed, good sense of goodwill for extremist groups. Because in some parts of the Sahel, extremist groups understand young people better than the state. They are able to pay attention to the grievances and aspirations of young people and provide opportunities for these young people. If you get a young guy $300, $500, a motorbike, and a gun, you have a very committed and loyal member of these groups. We have extremist groups who are providing small microloans to local community traders, providing other services like water that allows them to build a sense of goodwill and support from these populations. These are things that young people are looking at. These are things that young people wish to have and aspire to have, opportunities to live out their aspirations, to create jobs for themselves and others, and to live out what I call the entitlements of citizenship. And if government recedes in that to extremist groups, you're going to have a huge problem that would overwhelm everyone. And we're seeing it in significant ways, the absence of government in terms of their role in young people's growth and provision of economic opportunities for them to realize their aspirations or attain what I call the entitlements of citizenship. So these are the issues that characterize the problem that we're dealing with. And so we cannot succeed in dealing with terrorism in West Africa with this same approach, militarized, over-securitized approach to terrorism. Our response has been over-securitized, has been over-militarized. We cannot succeed in dealing with terrorism in West Africa if we ignore the role of young people and government's capacity to provide them the opportunities to realize their aspirations. Because somewhere in our work, we have argued strongly that the problem of violent extremism in West Africa largely is a product of the manifestation of and frustrations of young people who have lost faith in their governments and in their government's capacity to provide what I call the entitlements of citizenship. And if we really want to succeed here, we have to involve the role of young people and conditions that allow them to thrive. And I think this is where I would summarize. I will end my presentation, and hopefully we'll get comments and questions for further discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Mutaru. You can go with Theodora if you'd like.
Okay, so let me say good evening to everybody, and then also thank you to New Lines for this great and very insightful event. I think it's very impressive that we can get local voices in the lead up to the African Leadership or African Leaders Summit that will be happening next week in the US. And so this is a great initiative, and I encourage that we keep doing it so we hear from the real people. And I see myself as one of those real people, and Mitaru. So Mitaru has given us a good oversight, and I just want to say one thing about what Mitaru said about young people being a problem, and I always call it securitization of young people. That we securitize young people, we see young people as security threats, and that should not be the case. The lack of opportunities and the lack of opportunities for young people really is the problem, but not the young people themselves. And we always have to focus on creating opportunities for them and not the young people themselves as a problem. So Mutaru has shared a lot about how we are dealing with violent extremism. And I just want to add a few more to the security situation and issue in West Africa. So Apart from violent extremism, which is a big problem, we have other problems of security on our hands. One of it is unconstitutional change of government, which is also a big problem we have now. In just in like 1 year, between last year, April, to this year, March, that is 2022 March, we had about four coup d'etats in Africa. Most of it coming from West Africa, Guinea, Mali, and Burkina Faso. And we also had Burkina Faso again in September. And I think the most worrying part of these unconstitutional changes of government is the reaction of citizens to these coup d'etats, where we see people, or we see citizens actually rejoicing or actually excited of this unconstitutional change of government. And it tells you that something is wrong. Citizens are beginning to question democracy as a system of rule in our countries. And that is a big issue. And what is causing this unconstitutional changes of government is a lot, some of which has been alluded by Mitaru earlier. Human rights abuses and human rights issues, unemployment, crisis in state-society relationships. And we have governments that are practicing more closer and closer governments, closing the space for civic participation and civil society participation. And all these are causing some kind of discord. We have governments and leaders that are wanting to change their term, that and unconstitutional political machinations. We have violations of human rights, as I said earlier. We have leadership crisis on our hands. We have also the impact of COVID on our economics, and of course the popular Russia and Ukraine war, which is affecting food security in very high and alarming levels. And all of these things are causing some agitation among citizens. And we are having this unconstitutional change of government that is rocking our democratic votes a bit. And that is a problem that we have to be looking at. And governments and leaders, as they are meeting, should also be taking a look at those issues and see how we can work with that. We have also very, very high issues and high rates of transnational organized crimes happening. In terms of our security, we have drugs happening, we have illicit trade in small arms happening, and all of these are one way or the other fueling our insecurity and political instability across across West Africa and also across Africa. We have if you like, our porous borders, that is also contributing highly to these illegal trades across. And I think that the biggest issue most of the time is illicit trade in arms across our borders, which we are not able to man very well and control very well. And so our border security issues are also a big problem for West Africa. And so these are some of them. And for the Sahel, one huge, I think Mutaru made mention of security in the Sahel. One huge issue in the Sahel also is cattle rustling, which is one of the major illicit funding avenues that terrorist groups are using to fund their illicit activities across. So cattle rustling is a very big problem in the Sahel and in West Africa when it comes to illicit markets and illicit trade and transnational organized crimes. And all of these things are wobbling or are affecting our peace and security, plunging us into very deep problems. And so as I speak about these things, just to widen up our security challenge a bit from where Vitari left off, you see that these challenges will not be solved and cannot be solved or minimized or addressed only by the kinetic approaches as Mitari has beautifully laid out. A lot is needed to be done with civilian consultation, with civilian inputs, with civilian playing a key role in finding solutions for some of these issues. And that's why at FOSDA, where I work, we have been working a lot with young people, because young people, as we see it, are for today and for tomorrow. Whatever is happening today affects young people and today, and also affects their future. And so we have climate change issues, very terrible one. Our cycle is changing. Food insecurity has set in. Food price has gone up, skyrocketing, and that is causing a lot of agitation. But what is the role of young people in all of this? We have high, very, very high youth unemployment in West Africa. I think the last I checked, we have over 17% of young people not being employed. Underemployment is over 50%. And if you talk about unemployability of young people, is a very big problem. So our security problems hinge on these structural problems we have. I will touch on this youth unemployment one. There are a host of others, that is our democracy infrastructure, so many other things. But I think that then there is a greater need to look at youth and their employability skills, their employment, the opportunities for youth, because if we are able to help young people out of these predicaments and lessen the plight of young people in West Africa, that will be so helpful, so great to our security issues. Because like Mitaru has said earlier, give a young person $500, some cocaine, some guns, and you have them. But what if we bridge that gap where that $500, that arm and whatever will not make any sense to that young person? What if we bridge that gap so that linkage between the young person and these armed groups will be broken off totally? And that is what we stand for here. How do we bridge that gap? And that's where we engage young people as much as possible, and also advocating for policies, youth development policies, such as technical vocational education and training skills for young people. Because we believe that technical vocational education and training skills is one of the, I won't say the easiest, but one of, fairly the easiest way to get young people employed, get young people hands-on skills right in school, and after school they can just set off and get something doing with the skills they have acquired. But we have a huge challenge with that on the West African continent. We have not taken technical vocational skills very seriously. Our education system has been heavily grammar or the grammar type of education, where we are doing courses that has nothing to do with our reality and the needs or our market needs. And so our call has been that West Africa focuses on technical vocational education for young people, give them hands-on training, and so that when they are out of school, they have something to do. They can set up their own businesses, they can employ other young people, and we can begin to produce the things we need for ourselves. And we are talking about industrialization without training the industrialists, without preparing the young people to be industrialists. And so that's the call we have about youth employment. We are also working with youth, sensitizing them about radicalization, training them on how to move away from the path to radicalization and staying on the right course. So these are some of the things we are doing. And I also know that we also do a lot of work on democracy, encouraging encouraging young people to learn about the principles of democracy as we have it, because now we have a lot. I think I said at the beginning that people's trust and hope in democracy is waning. There's a lot of question on our media airwaves every morning whether democracy is the right approach to governance or the right system to governance for the African. And yes, we know that we've been practicing democracy even before colonization. And so we have been trying to get young people, imbibing in young people the principles and ideals of democracy so that young people can take it up from where it's being left off to strengthen our democracy. So this is what I would say for now, and I hope to continue when I have another opportunity. Thank you.
Theodora. I think you left us on a wonderful focus point of youth and the opportunities that are there, right? I feel like so often we focus on the capacity as a limitation, right? We can only do so much. We only have so much funding. We only have so much support. We only have so many hours in a day, right? We were all speaking earlier of it's December and we're finishing up things before January comes in 2023, right? So capacity and I think that we had some wonderful talks previously of youth as such an opportunity, right? Like there's so much energy, there's so much that can be done to guide them in the right direction. So I think this is a great time to move to Emmanuel, if you will. So Youth Advocates Ghana, it's in the name. So if you want to maybe bring us to the conversation of how do we successfully implement that, right? So like when it comes to programming and getting this done and like what have you noticed works when it comes to working with youth?
Right, thank you very much, and warm greetings from Ghana, and thank you to colleagues who earlier on contributed to the discussion. I think it has been very insightful listening to all of you. So I think I will start by joining Theodora when she talks about young people not being a problem, but as people who are already at the forefront of promoting sustainable development within their own communities. But it is a fact that young people are key partners when it comes to local initiatives, community development initiatives, and ensuring peace, promoting security within their own communities. Unfortunately, what we are not asking ourselves is that how did we get to the point, or how did we get to the problem that we are in now? What has failed? What is it that we are not doing right? That is allowing young people to take advantage or to find joining violent extremism as an opportunity. I think if we are able to answer these questions, it will help us to begin to design solutions that are practical, that will help us to be able to ensure young people do not find this very attractive, but can really live their nationalistic life and contribute their quota to the development of their communities. One of the things that we have observed is the level of failed states that we have within the West African region, where we have, in most cases, our national governments are not responding adequately to the needs and aspirations of young people. And I think we really talk about that a lot. In recent times, we are seeing extremely high cost of living, not only for basic necessities, but even to access opportunities. It will surprise you that there are many young people in Ghana, for instance, who are willing to serve their country, be it in the police or in the security forces, or even to work, to get opportunity to work in the civil service. And these opportunities are extremely expensive. It's just like the jobs are being sold out to young people. And you ask yourself, how many young people will have the capacity to be able to raise the kind of resources or money that is needed for them to have even access to opportunities that are supposed to be free to them. And so when these things fail, you see that there is the sense of citizenship begins to, as it were, people begin to lose that kind of sense of interest, even in the country. And then when they lose their interest, they begin to forge ideas. What can we do to survive? And these are some of the things that, for me, I think that we need to begin to interrogate. And I know Mumuni and his organization have been doing a lot of work around research into the challenges that we face in West Africa. And I will encourage that we can do a lot more to speak to young people to understand the kind of frustrations they go through every day in order for them to be able to live. As Youth Advocate Ghana, we are a youth-driven organization. We believe in the youth. We believe that young people are innovatives. They come with great ideas, whether it is in the area of entrepreneurship or community-led initiatives. Whatever it is, we see many young people across the African region leading several initiatives that require the support of our national government to scale up those initiatives and to provide opportunity for other young people. What we are not seeing is how sometimes government policies fail to meet the aspirations of young people. And I'll give you some examples. In Ghana, for instance, you have, in recent times, there was a program that was launched by the government, the Youth in Agriculture program. I personally know many young people who participated in the training. And the intention of the government was to provide seed funding to these young entrepreneurs to be able to scale up their agribusinesses or whatever initiative they're involved with. For several years after the training, they have never heard anything back from the government. How do you expect such a young person to see the government or to see the country? First of all, their hearts is filled with bitterness. Bitterness against leaders, bitterness against the state, bitterness against government policies. So this is actually the genesis, because people will once, and Mutare talk about the fact that people, once we give them $500 and some few equipment, they will jump onto the operation. Yes, that is true. But can we prevent that? We can prevent that by being honest and being truthful to the citizens, by providing opportunities free of charge to them and making sure that whatever programs and policies that is put forward are fully implemented to the benefit of young people. So these are very, very critical. Another thing that we probably have not looked at is the issue of rule of law and access to justice. I think in the last election that Ghana held, there were several injustices that occurred, and most of these injustices were against young people. Many young people were killed just by the fact that they are ready to exercise their franchise, to vote for the government. People lost their lives. We have seen other violent activities occurring in different regions across the country. And at the end of the day, the kind of justice is that these young people are looking for are denied. And these are emotional issues. These are things that people want to know and want to have access to, but they don't get, they are denied completely. So the sense of nationality or the sense of citizenship is lost right from that moment. People begin to think about, what can we do? Do we take a revenge on the government? So when we say that young people are a problem, they are actually not a problem. It is the government that is the problem. Because when you deny people opportunities, when you deny people access to justice, when you abuse the rule or you bend the law just to favor you, then you see that people will rise against you. And that is what we are seeing increasingly within our sub-region. And there's a need for us to promote a lot more of rule of law. Justice should prevail in every circumstances. Opportunities that are for young people should not be monetized. People should not pay to get jobs. People should not pay to go to police service, to go to military, to go to fire service. It should be made free to them. But this is something that we have talked about for several years, and there seems not to be any solution to it. In fact, I can tell you on authority that these problems are even escalating on a daily basis. So we seem not to be getting closer to solutions. And there's a need to ensure that kind of inclusion in all the things that we do. And I also want to say that if we want to succeed in this front, there is the need to ensure that young people who now we call them problem are actually at the forefront of creating solutions. if you go to the hotspot regions, how can we work with young people within those communities, train them and turn them into champions of peace? How do we work with local champions within those communities to promote peaceful coexistence and promote local initiatives that can benefit young people? Those are very important initiatives that, in my view, will give us a lot more results than what we are currently seeing. There is the need to ensure that programs that are designed by government are programs that reflect the aspirations of young people. If people want to go to school, they should have the opportunity to go to school. If they want to start their businesses, they should have the opportunity to start their business, to scale it up, to receive the level of support that will be needed for their business to succeed. And so these are some important recommendations that I feel that, in addition to what my colleagues earlier said, will be very critical if we want to make any progress in terms of defeating the issues of violent extremism in West Africa. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So I think you did an excellent job of teasing out a point that we can build on here. So we have our next two, Salman and Paul, are both, I think, going to tie us up really nicely in two different ways. I think, Salman, if you'd like to speak for a little bit on from Friends of the Nation, right, as being an NGO or civil society organization that's a little different than some of the organizations that you guys work in, right? They're more environmental advocacy, not so much directly focused on even youth or peace and security, right? So what are maybe some good practices when it comes to partnership with how do we foster a better relationship, right, between youth and government? How do we programmatically, right, succeed? And then Paul's gonna, I think, wrap us up nicely with some current events and things to look on in terms of spillover in 2024 elections. But Salman, if you would like to join us and speak a little bit, I'm going to switch this here.
Yeah, okay, so thank you very much. So I believe, first of all, is to recognize the value and the strength that each partner brings up into programming. At Friends of the Nation, one of our core values is participatory approach to program development and also implementation, where we work with different spheres of stakeholders, including government, civil society, and also the private sector, to recognize the contribution of each partner and how those contributions will foster greater partnership geared towards poverty reduction and also sustainable development. So I believe that in this discussion, it is important that we recognize the contributions of partners and also treat partners with respect, and also adopt a participatory approach where at each stage of program development, we are able to recognize the strength and also the opportunities that it brings in terms of strengthening and partnership. And I also want to look at the discussions that was earlier shared on the youth, and also the issues on extremism and also the use of the issues of conflicts. And I believe that if we recognize the potentials of the youth and that we also foster greater collaboration with the youth in terms of policy development and also implementation, it will go a long way in tapping the considerable value of the youth in terms of policy formulation and also implementation. And that one will also bring about good governance, which is translated into transparency and accountability, and also the equitable distribution of resources that will foster peaceful coexistence between communities and their leaders, as well as the youth as well. So I believe that participatory approach to program implementation is the best way, recognizing each partner's strength and the contribution that they can make in fostering peace. I'll end here and also get my colleagues to also make their contributions. Thank you.
Thank you, Solomon. And Paul, if you'd like to go ahead. Paul from CDD. So I know you wanted to speak a little bit to the specific situations in Ghana, and maybe a couple of, bring this conversation to today, right? So all these things, right? Supporting youth and better implementation and policy and follow through and, really focusing on, developing societies rather than just focusing on a security approach. Like these are all very important continuous things and approaches to stability, good governance, peace and security, right? But I think let's kind of bring up the priority nature of it. These should be important all the time, but what is important today and why does this, we don't have the liberty of just treating this as a sustainable approach that we keep in priority, right? But we don't actually put on the spotlight. So I think if you'd like to contribute there on why this is important today and not just tomorrow.
Well, so I was saying here that when you assemble Mutaro and the colleagues, you could see they are talking from passion because these are people who have been on the ground, sacrificing their lives through research, through education, taking data to support the states. But the question is, do we have policy uptake? All those that civil society organizations have been doing, the data we've been generating, the contributions we've been making, do we have a listening ear from the political authority to work on them? That has been one of the challenges that we have. My colleagues have aptly laid down both the push and the pull factors that go with the potential to trigger violence. And in the last time we met at the Accra Initiative, all the contribution I made is that we shouldn't, for now, over-concentrate on what somebody from outside can do to us. We should try and lay the foundation for potential prevention of what somebody can do, because the threats within are much like the threats outside. Mutaro, my colleague Theo, and others, we've also spoken about some of them. Now, in the combination of all these factors they've laid, the unemployment, the youth board, it's gotten to a point that we are having increasing youth radicalization. So the data that I have on my desk, the CDD Ghana, the desk monitoring reports, in the first half of 2022, we have about 48 youth attacking police officers. That is the step we are going to do. 48 attacks against police officers. In Ghana here, we have had a military person who has been killed by civilians. It hardly happened in our history. We have had in Ablikuma 3 military officers who have been beaten to the pulp because they were going to protect their lands. So that's the radicalized level at which our youth have gotten to. Then you ask yourself, is it their fault? Because the enablers of crime is available. The last time the National Small Arms Commission did its updates on arms circulation in civilian hands in 2014, 2015, the data indicated that when you pick every 2 Ghanaians, each of us has a gun. That was the data. And out of the number that have data, 77% of them were unregistered. From 2015 to now, I don't know how many arms in circulation that we have. In the 2020 elections in Ghana, we recorded 8 people dying. Out of the 8 deaths, 6 were through shooting by arms. So I'm just laying emphasis to let you know that the enablers of crime is easily available. And the drugs for radicalization are easily available. Either when we are talking about ghetto life, we are talking about the peri-urban and the urban centers. You talk about Dansuma here, but now when you go to the mining communities, we have more and more ghetto lifestyles than we have in the urban centers. So the spread of crime is going everywhere. And this makes it more dangerous because when it gets to the border communities, that means we are laying a structure for easily infiltration. That's the picture that I just wanted to add to the beautiful presentations that my colleagues have already had. What have been the structures to work on this? Let me say that Theo was talking about implementing effective policies. Mutari was talking about effective justice system applicable to everybody, including the youth. It tells you that we have the policies and we have the structures, but implementation has been the problem. So when you go to even external crime, because of increasing crime and dynamism of it, we create constitutions, laws, and principles to counter it. So we have the framework for preventing and countering violent extremism. When you go to pillar 1 and 2 of the framework, it dedicates support from civil society organizations. The pillar 1 talks of preemptive, pillar 2 talks of preventive. It all gives to media, civil society organizations, and religious bodies. Ask around Ghana, how many people are aware of the framework? How many people have been mobilized by the national security for coordination for implementation of the framework? So we have the beautiful laws, but we don't implement. And in fact, let me tell you, security agencies in Ghana protect their mandates. They don't easily allow civil society organization collaborations. We're doing border security project education with the US Embassy, and we wanted an introductory letter so we can get access to the security officers there to ask questions about trend of security. We finished the projects 2 years last year. My letter to the national security, the Minister of Interior for introductory letter is still not responded. I'm just giving you this brief for you to know the environment. So it's not easy to deal with security here. We have the SGI, the Security Governance Initiative supported by the US Embassy. As part of the SGIs to establish Fusion Center, the Fusion Center's work is to coordinate security information on one stop. So here, when you go to the border communities and the security agents, they have immigration issue. Even if it's a police officer that across immigration problem, is hardly reported. So if I'm a CID, I deal with CID. If I'm custom, I deal with goods and services. If I'm migration, I deal with human transit. But now the Fusion Center seeks to have a one-stop shop that all the security agencies will have a go-to information center to access the information. But the center is located in Accra. When you go to the actual practical places of the border communities, they don't share information. There's no coordinated effort. It was just recently that the Boundaries Commission, the Major General Coach's effort, have formed what they call the Border Security Committee, BOSEC. That's even not even implemented. So among even the security agencies themselves, there's no coordination. There is no platform for engagement with local communities. So it's been a situation of we are here to do our security job, and we are also here to do our cross-border businesses. If you don't arrest me in my cross-border business, I don't have problem with you as security officer. That is the situation here. Our data assessing awareness of terrorism and radicalization across the country, the borders, indicate that almost 75% of people in the border communities are aware of terrorism and violent extremism through the television and the news they hear on radio. No state institution has taken the opportunity to have sensitization and what people should do. They just did see something, say something, broadcast just 1 week and it was off. This is the situation that we have got. So there's lack of awareness, there's lack of commitment from the citizens, and there's lack of collaboration and cooperation to deal with it. The combination about all these things is mistrust in the system. We preach security is a shared responsibility, but we don't actually practice that word. So the people will even have information and you'll be afraid to even leak the information. One of the research outputs from the data was fear of revealing the identity of informants. It's 60% of the people think that when they see issue and they report to the security agencies, the identity will be revealed. There are structural problems as which security issues are not tackled. One example, we had elections in 2022. In 2020, 8 people died. One FCDD Ghana, because right after the elections, there were misrepresentation of the actual number of deaths. While the police service was saying 6 people died through a statement, the MPP said 7 people died. The NDC said 8 people died. So one FCDD Ghana pulled up our data and we had 8 deaths. So we validated the police service, we validated to the NDC. Unfortunately, We sought audience with the MPP, we could not validate. But of course, we all later agreed that 8 people died. The time we finished our data gathering in 28 February 2022, out of the 8 cases, only 2 have been processed for courts. Only 2. So there's lack of attention to crime cases in the country. CDD Ghana again did a project for GIZ. We wanted to assess the feedback on response rates to cases reported to the PPSB, former PIPS. And the rate was that out of 100 cases sent to the PPSB, only about 15 of them get response or get attended to. So the justice system itself is weak. If there's something of that sort, people take the law into their own hands. And that becomes the ground for which infiltration can come. The worst of it is the absence of the state itself in most troubled communities. When you go to the border communities, development projects is deprived. There's no concrete, in fact, even if there's an attack and a security officer wants to call for more reinforcement, some places he will have to move his motorbike to about 1 mile away before he can get network services. Pipe-borne water, everything. One of the things that I started identifying that I was panicking was that there have been free construction of boreholes and mosque in even a small community, but the people are not aware who are giving them those products. Who is behind it? They are not aware. We are aware there are foreigners in our mining communities. More foreigners who are mining. We are also aware some of the sources of funds to support the activities of the radical groups is through mining. We have experienced dollar power in Ghana. We have some mining communities in the northern region, in the south, everywhere. That hub of the foreigners. Who are these foreigners? Where are they mining to? So the structural security problem here is more dangerous than what we think coming from outside. We need them to deal with it. The strategies have not worked. Just recently, we had a meeting with the Accra Initiative. The first time since the initiative came in 2007 that they've invited civil society organizations. I don't know whether Mutaro was there, but I saw Adib. You were there too. They have kept the initiative outside of civil society organization. But you need civil society organization to complement, as Theodora said, the kinetic aspect that you're using. It doesn't solve problem in local here. Kinetic approach should be dealt with the borders, warding off extravagance, warding off radicalism. But you need us to do the awareness creation, do the sensitization, the people who cross the border with motorbikes to go and bring people to the country. The hoteliers who harbor people, they don't know their identities. The chopback people, the taxi drivers. These are the people who should be aware of the dangers approaching and be aware of the situation to report. But these are the people, the attention that we are not paying to. So it's very dangerous. And apart from this beautiful outlay that my people have said, don't let's forget, Tidora mentioned it in passing, issue of transhumans. Cattle wrestling is becoming more and more dangerous across borders. And the fear is that you don't know who is coming with the cattle. You don't know who is the owner. Because of free trade, free services, per ECOWAS protocol, you cannot drive anybody away who is coming to do business. But also we don't have any proper scrutinization and scanning at the border to see. And even when they enter, where they lodge, because they are nomadics, they roam, they can go everywhere. So even if there's infiltration, it means these people can roam the entire country within 3 days. And they are doing their work. We see them with the cattle. That's more dangerous of aspect that we are talking to. So to me, in order not to talk worse, people have tried. And you can also see, even though the state is not recognizing or putting in place measures to officially collaborate with CSOs to work, for the little that you've seen here, what Solo is doing, what Ima is doing, what Theo is doing, what Mutari is doing, it tells you that we are prepared. We are willing to support and come in as states as provided in the framework, which they are not making it practical. Just recently, the Catholic Bishops Conference of Ghana has instituted a program they call the Sahel Peace Initiative. The Sahel Peace Initiative seems simply to fight against youth radicalization in the country, and they intend to extend it to all Catholic missions across borders, our neighboring countries. It tells you even religious organizations are prepared to help. Here are some of the things that we are doing. The justice system has been slow. Afrobarometer data says that, according to the data, 77% of Ghanaians think that when the rich and the elites have issues with the ordinary man, it is likely that the rich will have justice against the poor. If you have a situation that people are gradually, I also said earlier that this year alone, we have had more than 40 attacks from citizens against security officers. If you have the situation, it means that people are gradually losing trust in state institutions. And that is dangerous. We have chieftaincy issues, we have nomadic herdsmen farmer issue, we have violence in the mining communities, we have violence in the land guard issues. All these things are there, and they catch fire in election year. So going into 2024, we also have a position that have been taken by the political parties, especially with the announcement by Electoral Commission that is going to use only national card, ID card as the full identification for registration of new voters, which the opposition, radio opposition party has condemned and stamped itself from. Already what happened in 2020, we've not dealt with it. The two election cases that went to courts, 2013 after the 2012 elections, 2021 after the 2020 elections, the response from the losing parties. In 2013, Nana Akufo-Addo said that he does not accept the verdict, that because of democratic principle, he will abide by it. In 2021, President Mahama said the same thing. It means that the people have about in their minds that the justice system is not trusted. Are we going to see another court case in case any of these parties face suspects a foul deal in 2024 elections? So the grounds are prepared from all angles, from our electoral angles, from our possible spillover from foreign countries, from our structural challenges that we are not dealing with. Look, we have mentioned the youth unemployment, youth employment. The youth employment is getting to a level of youth radicalization. Drug abuse, Nana Banamwa was doing something on television, trying to see youth who take tramol. And when you look at the pictures, it's wondering. When you go to the eastern region, the Volta, everywhere, the youth are now increasingly indulging in drugs. They are always high, so they are not afraid of indulging in any violence activities that they can get. Don't forget the increasing kidnapping cases that we have in the country. Where are they from? So these are, in my data that I was talking about, in the first half of 2022 alone, 25 youth were abused. 6 of them were killed. We have had numerous road robberies. We have had numerous theft cases. All these things buttress the fact that there are structural problems that makes it easy for any infiltration. We don't know what is happening between our borders at the Burkina Faso. After the massive radicalization, after the coup d'etat, the people who were fleeing, where did they go? How are they harbored? Who scrutinized them? The arms that were used there, we have some of them being imported into the country. So I will not go far, I think the question and answers will come. But just to say that the structures are there, but our response have been weak.
Thank you. I think I'm going to take moderator's prerogative and ask a question, and anyone is welcome to respond. I think you guys have all done a wonderful job of laying out not only the problem, right, but a lot of solutions and a lot of ways that we can change perception, especially towards youth and towards security issues with a more balanced approach. I think the ideal, right, is that you have decision makers or policymakers listen to some of these insights and feel agreement, right, and agree that these things are important, and they agree with the approaches that you guys have shared and the programs and projects and the mission statements that your organizations espouse, right? So what next? So if there's a desire in this next couple of years, right, it's been made quite clear that the security issue in Sahel especially, there's international and state, obviously, interest in quelling that. and not letting it spread farther than it should. It's already too far, right? So what can be done? So if some of these international or state entities say, yes, we want to be better at partnering, or yes, we want to help with implementation, what are a couple of things that they can do in the short term to be true to that? And I do have a question.
Let me come
after
first.
this.
I can see Mutaro typing a response to a question a colleague has asked, and but let me come in, then Mutaro and my colleagues will come up. So we have laid about 4 different challenges when you sum up. One is weak enforcement of law, and 2 is the structural problems of unemployment, of lack of services, absence of states in some of the communities, increasing armed use, armed circulation in the country. And the other is weak institutions that are not responsive to the system. So when you pick the state's responsibility that it should do, I think it goes beyond us. It goes beyond us as civil society organizations. There have been several approaches from the REX, the regional community like ECOWAS. There have been several approaches from the African Union. Yet I don't know whether they are not working or they have not been effective. Because yes, African Union and ECOWAS are member organizations for the same states leaders. But I believe it's something that we have to look at it again. The ECOWAS protocol on ACDEC, trying to monitor colleagues based on, recently I was discussing something with my executive director, Prof. Kwesi Prempeh, and CDD Ghana is trying to design a structure in the frame of traffic lights. So we have red, green, and yellow. So when a country is marked green, then it means it's performing okay, but it doesn't mean there are no structural problems. When a country is marked yellow, that means there's a danger that the regional bodies should have to take care of that country. The country goes red, there are so many things. We need to start pushing our government from the regional level, the regional economic community, ECOWAS and AU level. That, for instance, recently they went to hold, APRM is holding a conference in Benin. They held a conference in Burkina Faso. A country that is not qualified to be a member can host a member African Union program. So we need to start pushing for review of the protocols of AU and ECOWAS from all of our angles that we need. And we need to have a checkmate that civil society organization can individually monitor the performance of governance, the performance of democracy, the performance of human rights in particular countries, and report, just like the one that is doing early response to the ECOWAS system, alerting of security threats. We can alert governance threats. We can alert human rights threats. We can alert democracy threats, because these are all forms of security threats. And mark a country that ECOWAS, African Union, these countries have fallen from green to yellow. And these are the indicators for which we are saying that you have to take them on board. Excuse them from your meetings. Excuse them from holding international conferences here. That should be the warning. And when they trigger into red, then you take the actual action. Most actions that the REX and the AU take mostly go against the citizens and not the people who cause the problem, because they are against coup d'etats, but they are not against maltreatment of citizens. We need to take care of that. That is the level that we need to push our state to be responsible in implementing some of the things that Mutaro, Theodore, and my colleagues said. By tracking them, review the African peer review mechanism structures and actually continue doing it. Allow civil society input in the APRM. What are the indicators for assessing government performance in the country? We need to broaden it to include security and other things. We need to start from there. Then about the structural problems, I've seen skirmishes of what Ghana Army is doing. So that now Ghana Army is trying to make the state presence in the border community. So from this year, June, they have started constructing clinics, boreholes, and some few other activities in the border community. I think it needs to be a national agenda. That we have national agenda of Coastal Development Authority, national agenda of Northern Development Authority, Southern Development. We should have Border Community Development Authority, purposely, because that's where the danger stands. I was arguing this at a forum, and somebody said, do I have any data to suggest that the border communities are underdeveloped more than any other place? No, that's not what we're talking about. We are talking about the pressure points where the danger lies. That's what we are talking about. There should be a purposive agenda to develop it. If a security officer is being attacked and he needs to drive about 2 hours before he can get service to call for reinforcement, what will happen to the community members? So there should be a purposive development. And of course, we have been talking about youth employment, JIDA, so many youth employment programs in the country. As my colleagues always have gone into, there have been a system of manipulation for the leaders themselves. Either somebody uses it to manipulate the system, and some of the youth employment authority staff are politicians sharing booty to their people. We need to review some of these policies. Yes, it's good that we have a structured youth program that will relieve our youth from this joblessness and frustration they are having in the system, that make them available for radicalization. There should be a purposive approach for the youth. Then the last one I can speak about is education and sensitization. In 2014, ONEP did a data collection in Burkina Faso, and almost 70% of Burkinabe citizens thought that what was happening in other countries, radicalization, terrorism, can never affect them. Down 2015, 2017, they had experienced more than 17 bombing. Our data here, the people are aware of terrorism, at least even if they don't know the details. They have heard the news on radio, on TV, but they don't think Ghana could be engulfed with terrorist activities. So the complacency, it's what is killing our collaboration for using the soft approach, data collection, monitoring, and education. We need to have a sustained education, especially the frontline operators, the hoteliers, the taxi drivers, the hospitality industries, the frontline people who cross the borders to bring people into the country without knowing their identity. You can go to a hotel, they will not even take your data. There are some of the people we need to target education, as Mutaru said. There should be targeted, not messaging, as the Ghana government was doing. If you see something, say something. Why must I say something? This is messaging. And we do that often in Ghana. In the election, somebody say we are doing education and say, go and vote. Why should I go and vote? Why should I, as a citizen of a border community, see something and tell you something? Let the people know the threats, as Mutaru said. So there should be a purposive formulation of message to the people to understand the threats and why they should contribute in fighting the threats. Let me end here for my people to come in.
Yeah. I think your question is one that is a worrying phenomenon. All the ingredients are there, like you said. Researches by national, international, including yours, have been done. As Mr. Grandpa has been talking, he's been listing one research after the other. So everything, all the indicators, all the pointers, everything has been pointed out and is being pointed out to our government, and which still seem to see very little action. Somebody says, for instance, in Ghana, somebody says Ghanaians are not angry enough to push our government to do the right things. And it seems to me and most of us in this sector that our governments are just not interested. From where we sit, that's how we see it, that our governments are just not interested in improving their livelihoods and developing our countries and in making life better for the Ghanaian, the West African. A typical situation we have here in Ghana, post-COVID, Russia, Ukraine, whatever, our economy is struggling. Government says it's not our fault. We say it's your fault. They point everything to Russia, Ukraine. The economy is struggling. Our city has been rated the worst performing in the world. I'm not saying that it's out there. Our city has been, things have skyrocketed. I think Emmanuel spoke about that. We are paying double, 3 times, and all Ghanaians are asking our government is to reduce the size of government. With over 80 ministers, what are you doing? Reduce the size of government, cut it to 40, cut it to 50. But no, our government will not listen. So you ask, is this government really interested in taking care of the people, in alleviating the poverty? We have a recent budget that has been read with over 23 increments in taxes on the back of the suffering of the people. And you are wondering if our governments are really interested. Everything Mr. Brampa has been talking about, you see the passion with which he's been talking. We've been saying it, and like you're saying it, we've been saying it over and over and over and over again, and we are not seeing the change. Do we want to see the young people on the streets pelting stones? Is that what we want to see before we bring the change that needs to be done? So when you ask me what more needs to be done, for me and where I sit, I only tell the young people, we need to talk, we need to keep talking, we need to negotiate, we need to be diplomatic. But how long can I keep saying that? And how long can we all keep saying that? So, well, somebody just told me recently that democracy is for those who can talk. It says that the design of democracy is for those who can talk, and so we have to keep talking. And such platforms are important. Hopefully somebody will hear us. But I think also that our development partners are very, very important in helping us shape our economy and also take care of the welfare and the needs of the people. So we have IMF coming into town, and we have civil society talking about all the ills of our economy, but we'll have IMF come back and give us a very good, beautiful report. And we are like, okay, is it the same Ghana we know that they are talking about? We have World Bank sometimes will come out with there was COVID fund, we spoke about it, the corruption within the COVID fund. World Bank will come back and tell you it was great. And then really, so we really need our international partners to come along with us in this journey, because when you look at aid and you wonder if aid is really helping us or is deepening our sorrows, and sometimes, in fact, most of the times there's a lot of literature that supports the fact that aid is actually deepening our sorrows and making us worse off, because it's actually increasing corruption and all that. So we really need our international partners, development partners, to come along with us citizens and support us and make our voices stronger, demand real accountability from governments, because we can do so much as CSOs. We can do all the reporting. We still do all the reporting, all the calling for accountability, trying as much as possible to hold back the violence, to hold back the anger, understanding the need for peace and security, and trying as much as possible to hold all of that back. But if all of that is continuous to be thrown in on our faces, I'm afraid that cannot go for so long. So I think that to add to everything that has been said, we will need our international development partners to come with us on this journey, to help demand real accountability, to do some great and real monitoring and evaluation of the funding they are sending and of the support they are giving to our governments. We really need them to do some real good monitoring of whatever they are giving, so that they get the real reports of what they are funding us with and what they are supporting us with. Other than that, they get great reports in their books, great reports in their books, and the problems persist here. And as you can see, like I said earlier, before last year, we've only had one coup d'etat in Africa. In a year, we've had over 5 coup d'etats. Where are we going next? And as Mitaru had said also, we have violent extremism taking up over 50% of West Africa. Where are we going next? We all need to sit up, not just us as citizens or CSOs or as governments, but our development partners must also sit up to support us. Thank you.
I think that's a wonderful note to close this session on. I think that's a great tagline for future conferences. International partners come along with us on this journey. I think we have a movie or a book title in the making. but I think this is just the start of the conversation, right? So there'll be a lot of side events and a lot of official closed door events in this coming week, the Africa Leader Summit here in DC. And hopefully the topic of peace and security and stabilization is met sometimes with all right, how do we better engage our local actors? There's a lot of lip service being put to that term these days, and I think it would be great. And we'll have more project webinars and reports come out, and hopefully we can hear more from more local actors across West Africa. But let's, I think, continue to have your voices represented in that discussion space, and hopefully we can see some pressure, attention, and implementation of some of the wonderful things and insights that you guys have all shared with us today. So I'd like to thank our panelists. Thank you so much for joining us late afternoon, West Africa, Ghana time. Thank you for sharing some of your insights. I know you're all very busy running some very successful programs, projects, and NGOs over there. So thank you for taking some time out of your important days to share some of this, and I hope that some people in DC and across the world listen, and I hope they do something about it. So that is where we'll leave this one off, and I hope to continue discussions with you all at a future date.